They didn't know who she was, didn't ask, didn't wonder, didn't care. To them, she was just another woman drinking soda in a quiet corner booth, too quiet to matter, too calm to be dangerous. So they laughed, mocked, grabbed her arm like it was a joke. But when she stood, when her hand moved, and the biggest guy in the room folded into the table without a sound, the bar didn't just go silent, it froze, because someone whispered 3 words no one expected to hear that night. She's Navy SEAL. Now, before we show you the exact moment she took control, without rage, without violence, without breaking a single bone, drop a comment telling us where in the world you're watching from. Make sure you're subscribed with the bell icon turned on, and stay right here, because sometimes the most dangerous person in the room is the one who never had to raise their voice. Roper's Landing shouldn't have still been open, not at that hour. The kind of bar that stayed alive through inertia, and the fact that nobody with authority cared enough to shut it down. 6 miles from base, where the sea met concrete, and the breeze carried salt that never quite washed clean. The neon sign above the door buzzed. Inside smelled like stale beer and wood rot. Floors warped from decades of humidity nobody bothered fixing. Pool table leaned left. Everyone knew. No one cared. Duct tape held 3 bar stools together. The jukebox hummed static between songs that nobody played anymore. In the back booth, beneath a photo of some rusted carrier that got decommissioned before half the current personnel enlisted, Lieutenant Commander Mara Lorne sat with a glass of flat soda and a training log she wasn't reading. Black crew neck, worn boots, hair tied back without ceremony, one leg tucked under her, the other stretched toward the aisle. She'd been holding the same page open for 20 minutes. Some people drank to forget. Mara reviewed formations to remember who she used to be before her lungs filled with seawater, on a mission no one was allowed to acknowledge, and she stopped being the kind of operator anyone recognized. The regulars knew her, not by name, just knew the lines not to cross. A few nodded when she walked in, but nobody sat beside her. She liked it that way. The door opened, cold air first, then 6 figures, 4 civilians in hoodies and work boots, 2 off-duty aviation techs still in their undershirts and flight deck jeans, the kind of mix that looked fine for 15 minutes before it went sideways, laughing before they even ordered, talking about torque limits and busted cranes, and women who don't get how heavy real work is. They didn't notice Mara, didn't notice Weller either. The bartender, older Navy vet with faded knuckle tattoos, and the kind of calm that made young men nervous when they finally paid attention. The biggest civilian noticed her first, cocked his head, squinted. "Hey, who brings homework to a bar?" His friend snorted. "Maybe she's waiting for a date who reads too much." Mara turned a page. Weller's rag stopped mid-swipe. He didn't say anything yet, just watched. The group got louder, threw darts too hard, called each other names that weren't quite jokes. One of the techs looked back toward Mara, muttered something about her being shy or lost. Nobody disagreed, but Weller knew better. Last time someone underestimated her in this bar, they left through the front door sideways. The jokes didn't get quieter. That group energy fed by beers and unearned confidence and the safety of numbers. The aviation tech with the backwards cap leaned toward the big guy. "Brennan," his sweatshirt said. "Bet she's someone's shy girlfriend, waiting for permission to breathe." Brennan smirked, waiting for someone to save her from us. More laughter. Weller's scowl didn't slow them. He finally spoke, voice low, calm, direct. "She's not your entertainment." The civilians glanced at him like he was furniture. One gave a mock salute. They ignored him after that. Always did, until the moment they couldn't. Another civilian, leaner and twitchier, tapped his buddy's arm. "Hey, sweetheart, you look lost. Need help finding the ladies' room?" A few chuckles. Mara didn't lift her eyes. Didn't change posture. "No." One word. Not defensive, not rattled. Just enough to kill the laughter without trying. It annoyed them. "Someone missed nap time," one of the techs muttered. Weller dried a glass with the same rag. Didn't look away this time. Just waited. "Too quiet to be trouble," the lean civilian added. "Probably admin from the payroll office. Desk job and a protein shake." More smirking. Weller shook his head. They didn't get it. Not yet. Brennan thumped his glass on the table. "All right, new game." He stood, stretched his shoulders, rolled his wrists like it was performance. Every bar's got a story. I'm about to find out hers. The group hooted. Weller's hand tightened around the glass. Don't. Not loud, not threatening, just certain. Brennan laughed. Relax, Pops. Just talking. He flexed his hands. Strongest guy in 3 counties. Beat a Marine arm wrestling last month. Left-handed. One of the techs whispered, watch this. She'll go from quiet to interested real fast. Weller said nothing. Mara didn't move. The regulars at the pool table paused mid-rack. One leaned on his cue, eyes drifting toward the booth. Brennan crossed the floor, 6 steps on old wood. One bad idea growing worse with every stride. Mara's fingers beneath the edge of the table uncurled. He reached her booth with the confidence of someone who'd never been told no, in a way that mattered. Leaned one elbow on the edge of her table, casting shadow across her training log. You've been quiet all night. Mind if I sit? Mara didn't look up right away. Finished the line she was reading, folded the page corner back with precise fingers, then lifted her eyes. Yes. He laughed, sharp, loud, performative. Good one. Slid into the seat across from her. Shoulders broad enough to push the air sideways. She didn't shift, didn't make room. Her posture stayed exactly as it was. Like nothing about him required adjustment. Weller muttered, Buddy, don't. Brennan ignored him. So what you got there? You the studying type or what? Reached casually toward her glass. Some stupid gesture meant to assert himself. His fingers were a breath from the rim when her hand came down. 2 fingers. Not forceful, not fast, just final. His hand stopped like she'd pinned it under rebar. Brennan blinked. You serious? Mara removed her fingers, corrected a small error. The tiny display of control lit something ugly in him. Need to reclaim superiority. Be bigger than whatever he'd just run into. He reached for her again. Not the glass this time. Wrapped a thick hand around her forearm. Not a squeeze. Ownership. The kind of grip that meant stand up when I tell you to. The entire temperature of Roper's Landing shifted. Pool cues hesitated. Jukebox hummed between static frequencies. A Navy petty officer by the dartboard exhaled a breath that sounded like dread. Weller stopped polishing. Didn't yell. Didn't bark. Brennan, let go. Even Brennan's friends sensed it. Leaning back, exchanging glances they couldn't explain. But Brennan didn't feel the warning. Felt the challenge. He tugged on her arm. Come on, don't play hard to get. Mara stood, not yanked, not pulled. She simply rose. Chair didn't scrape loud. Stance didn't widen. Pulse didn't change. She just stood, straight, balanced, calm, looking first at his hand, then at him. Her voice barely above the hum of the lights. Let go. Brennan's grip tightened. Bad instinct. Worst decision. He pulled again, harder. Somewhere near the bar, the petty officer whispered, Oh no. They could all see it. The shift in Mara's shoulders, stillness in her core, calculated alignment of her wrist inside his grip. They didn't know her story, didn't know her file, didn't know the 3 letters that once defined her career, but they knew this. A quiet woman who didn't flinch was far more dangerous than a loud man who couldn't sit still. Brennan yanked one more time. The night snapped. His third yank wasn't a punch, wasn't a strike, just brute force trying to drag her closer by size, instinctive, sloppy, the last mistake he got to make. Mara didn't resist the pull. She moved with it. Half step forward, barely a shuffle, shifted her weight off his axis. Elbow dipped, wrist rotating inside his grasp like water slipping through fingers. CQD wrist escape drilled 1,000 times in dimly lit armories and sand-floored deployment tents. Before Brennan processed that his grip had vanished, Mara's forearm had already slid across his, redirecting his momentum downward. His hand hit the table, knees bent on reflex, balance evaporated. A muttered, "What the?" escaped him, ended in a grunt when she used his forward motion to fold him cleanly against the edge of the booth. No slam, no flourish, precise leverage. Controlled elbow lock that pinned him without pain unless he fought it. The entire bar froze. No dart fell, no stool creaked. Even the jukebox seemed to hold its static. Brennan's friend, the leaner civilian, reacted without thinking. Brain registered only one thing. His buddy was bent over by a woman half his size. He lunged. Mara stepped aside like she'd known the attack was coming hours ago. Caught his wrist mid-swing, rotated it behind his back, guided him downward with the grace of someone handling equipment, not a person. His shoulder hit floorboards with a flat thud. Jesus, one of the aviation techs choked out. The second tech panicked. Not brave enough to rush, not smart enough to stay out. Half-stepped in, fist clenched, eyes wide, like someone realizing a storm wasn't made of water. Mara turned toward him, not menacing, not poised to strike, just present. Stop. He didn't. He swung or tried to. Mara angled her body, letting the strike miss by inches, redirected his palm with a quick parry, sending it slamming into the bar counter. Not hard enough to injure, just enough to shock his confidence. Controlled kick nudged his knee, not to break it, just to send him stumbling backward into a stool. He froze with both hands raised. This isn't normal, he whispered to no one. Brennan strained beneath the elbow lock. What the hell are you? The question hung there, raw, breathless. Someone near the doorway, an older petty officer who'd seen enough deployments to recognize controlled violence, answered for her, voice barely above a whisper. She's Navy SEAL. Gasps, a few curses under breath. Two men near the vending machine stood so fast their stools toppled. Weller slammed a palm on the counter. Enough, pointed directly at Brennan's buddies. She'll break you if you push her. Don't make her prove she can. Mara was already releasing him, letting his arm go with mechanical calm, stepping back so he could breathe. Not a single movement wasted. Not a single hit thrown. Just precision. Just professionalism. Just the kind of control nobody expects from someone they misread as quiet. In the silence that followed, the truth settled over the bar like a dropped anchor. She hadn't won a fight. She had ended a lesson. At the pool table, a lance corporal with jump wings on his jacket turned to his buddy. Did you see the wrist rotation? That's not bar fighting. That's close quarters. His friend nodded slowly. And, she didn't strike once. Just redirected everything they threw. Near the dartboard, the petty officer who'd spoken earlier was still frozen, dart held loose between his fingers. He'd done 2 tours in the Gulf, seen enough combat footage to recognize efficiency when it moved in front of him. She could have snapped elbows, he said quietly to the woman beside him. Could have broken ribs. She chose angles instead. Why? The woman asked. Because broken bones mean paperwork. This? He gestured vaguely toward where Brennan was still catching his breath. This just means educated. The room didn't rebound. No whoops, no claps, no aftershock of drunken bravado. The air stayed heavy, still, like seconds after a car crash when no one's sure what broke and what didn't. Mara released Brennan's elbow with surgical calm. He staggered upright, disoriented, not injured, just undone. His ego tried to catch up before his legs did. He turned toward his buddies, searching for laughter that wasn't there anymore. Crazy woman, he muttered. But even he didn't believe it. Not after the way she moved without noise, without rage, like she'd been trained for something far colder than a bar fight. Weller stepped forward. You all right? Mara rolled her shoulder once, barely a gesture. I'm fine. No tremble in her voice, no crack in her expression. Her pulse hadn't risen a beat. The lean civilian still sat on the floor, back braced against the booth like the floor might flip. The 2 aviation techs didn't speak. One rubbed his wrist. The other looked like he might throw up. Their arrogance had left the room long before they would. She didn't even hit them, a young woman whispered to her boyfriend at the pool table. She just moved. Weller exhaled hard. That's what happens when you mistake quiet for weak. Mara didn't wait for applause, didn't stay for the fallout. She stepped away from the booth, adjusted the sleeve of her crew neck, walked toward the door like the moment was already over. No limp, no glance back, just her shadow stretching across the warped floorboards as she passed through the silence she'd created. Outside, the cold hit like a rinse. She took it in without blinking, standing for a moment beneath the low awning, hands at her sides. The door opened behind her. Ma'am? She turned slightly. The petty officer stood just inside the threshold, cap in hand, eyes a little wide. Were you really a SEAL? Mara's gaze met his. I still am. She turned and walked into the dark, boots striking the sidewalk with steady rhythm. No one followed, because when someone carries themselves like that, With restraint instead of rage, with precision instead of power, you don't chase them down for answers. You just stand there, trying to understand how someone that quiet had been the loudest presence in the room. It didn't take long for the incident to reach base. Not because people were gossiping, but because there were cameras. Cameras meant paperwork. Paperwork meant reports. Reports meant command was about to care. By morning, Security Officer Lieutenant Royce had received a flagged incident alert from the off-base liaison unit. The word SEAL had shown up in 3 separate witness statements. Royce was 36, clean-shaven, more meticulous than his office suggested. Spotless desk, mug always upright, every incident reviewed like it might end up in front of a tribunal. He tapped his pen once against a printout of the witness logs called Roper's Landing directly. Bar security footage from last night, you know the drill. Weller didn't ask why. You'll want camera 2 and 4, but let me say this now, she didn't start it. Royce paused. She didn't finish it either, Weller added. She corrected it. Royce wrote that down word for word. He'd worked long enough around SEALs to know when a sentence like that meant something specific. The footage came in under an hour. He watched it with the volume muted. First camera 4, wide shot of the booth, Brennan approaching, the grab, the pivot, the takedown. Everything clean, nothing excessive. Then camera 2, side angle of the second tech's failed swing, the defensive parry, the way Mara's kick sent him stumbling back. Not because she wanted him down, because she knew exactly where to place it, so he wouldn't step forward again. Royce leaned back. No aggression, no flourish, just pure trained response. He picked up the desk phone, punched 3 digits. Torres, you got a minute? Master Chief Torres arrived 4 minutes later, coffee in hand, reading glasses hanging from his collar. He'd been at Hollister longer than most of the current brass, ran dive operations before transferring to training command. What am I looking at? Torres asked. Royce turned the monitor, played the footage without comment. Torres watched in silence, took a sip of coffee, then leaned closer when Mara executed the wrist escape. Run that back, Royce did. That's Sayuk, Torres said. Filipino martial arts. She cross-trained in it during workup for maritime interdiction ops. He straightened. That's Kerr, isn't it? You know her? Deployed with her unit in 2019. Mogadishu extraction. She pulled a contractor out of a collapsed safe house while taking shrapnel to the shoulder. Didn't report the injury until we were wheels up. Torres set his coffee down. What these idiots do. Grabbed her, pulled her, tried to swing on her. Torres shook his head slowly. They're lucky she was feeling polite. Polite? She could have put all 3 in the hospital without breaking a sweat. What you're watching? He pointed at the screen. That's her being nice. Royce reread the statements from the involved parties. The 2 aviation techs claimed misunderstanding. One wrote she escalated things by overreacting. Brennan had gone further, calling it a physical confrontation provoked by attitude. Royce didn't blink. He clicked the mouse, rewound the footage, played it back in silence. Provoked by attitude, he muttered. The report wrote itself after that. 3 entries filed under incident code R19. Off-duty conduct, violent provocation. Mara Lorne's name included only once as subject of engagement, non-escalation response. That label had only ever been used twice on the base. Royce sent out a notice to both Aviation Texas units and copied in Brennan's job assignment supervisor. Mandatory conduct review, 0700 tomorrow. Command room B3. All individuals listed to be present. Footage will be reviewed. Witness testimony optional. Disciplinary actions pending. He sat back, tapped the top of the manila folder twice, added one final note to the internal summary. Subject demonstrated exceptional discipline under provocation. Recommended no further inquiry unless escalation occurs. He stared at that line a moment, then underlined it twice. Room B3 in the command wing wasn't built for drama. Gray walls, folding chairs, one mounted screen. Everything about it said be brief, be clear, be ready for consequences. At 0658, 3 chairs were already filled. Brennan sat dead center, shoulders squared, jaw tight, sweat blooming behind his ears. To his left and right, the 2 aviation techs. One picked at the Velcro on his sleeve. The other tapped a boot nervously against the tile. Behind them, their unit commanders sat in silence, watching. At 0700 sharp, the door opened. Lieutenant Royce entered with a laptop under one arm and a manila folder tucked beneath the other. He nodded to the COs but didn't smile. "Let's begin." He pulled the chair back at the head of the table, turned on the monitor. Exhibit 1. The screen lit up. Camera 4 from Roper's Landing. No commentary, just grainy footage. Brennan walking over, Mara not responding. The grab, the pivot, the takedown. Every movement as clean as a page torn from a field manual. None of the men spoke. Even Brennan looked away when his arm was folded against the booth. Royce let the footage play through once, then again, this time from camera 2. The second text lunge, the redirected strike, the stumble, the moment Mara stood centered, untouched, untouchable. Royce turned the monitor off, looked at Brennan. "You still want to explain this as a misunderstanding?" Brennan cleared his throat. "Sir, I regret the incident. I think emotions were high. There was confusion about authority." "She was your superior officer." "Yes, sir, but she wasn't in uniform, and the setting was informal." Royce didn't blink. "You grabbed her, you pulled her arm, then attempted to strike her when she stood. That's not confusion, that's aggression." The two techs exchanged a glance but stayed quiet. Royce turned to them. "Your statements claim she was hostile." "She was cold, sir," one said. "Didn't say anything. Gave off a vibe." Royce flipped open the file. "And your group text thread afterward was titled?" He raised an eyebrow, reading directly. "Seal Barbie goes full takedown." Hart winced. The other turned red. Royce turned to the back of the room. Lieutenant Commander Mara Lorne stood just inside the door. She hadn't sat, hadn't spoken, just observed. Royce gestured. "Lieutenant Commander, would you like to offer a statement?" Mara stepped forward. Her voice, as always, was calm, precise. "I was approached, grabbed, provoked. I responded to regain personal space. I inflicted no injuries. I requested no charges. I left quietly." The CO looked up from his clipboard. "You didn't press formal charges. Why?" "It wasn't necessary." "Why not?" Mara's eyes stayed steady. "Because correction was achieved." The phrase landed like weight on the table. Unavoidable, undeniable. Royce looked back at his notes. "We also have witness testimony. Petty Officer Daniels was present." He glanced toward the door. "Send him in." The petty officer from the dartboard entered, stood at attention. Royce nodded for him to speak. "Sir, I observed the entire incident. The subject, Lieutenant Commander Kerr, was alone, non-engaging, not impaired. Corporal Brennan and his associates initiated all contact. She gave clear verbal warnings. When physical contact was made, her response was controlled and proportional. No strikes, no escalation beyond what was necessary to disengage." "Your assessment?" Royce asked. "Textbook defensive tactics, sir. She could have caused serious injury and didn't." Brennan shifted in his seat. Hart stared at his boots. Royce dismissed the witness, turned back to the Marines. "So we have video evidence, witness testimony, and your own admissions. This isn't ambiguous." Royce leaned back. "Final verdict. Brennan suspended 60 days, mandatory behavioral retraining. Aviation techs received formal reprimands, entered into personnel records, restricted weekend duty. Civilians blacklisted from Roper's Landing 6 months. Mara, dismissed. No write-up, no warning, just a nod." She turned without a word and left the room. Behind her, no one moved, because sometimes the quietest person in the room had already said everything they needed to. 7 days later, Roper's Landing looked exactly the same. Same flickering neon sign, same warped floorboards, same dead jukebox, same familiar faces leaning over half-empty glasses. But something in the air had changed. Not loud, not obvious, just different. When Mara Lorne walked in, nobody said a word. Not because they were afraid, because they remembered. She wore the same thing as last time. Black crew neck, worn boots, hair tied back without effort. This time, there was no training log in her hand. Just silence, and a quiet seat in the same booth near the back. Weller didn't ask what she wanted, just placed a glass of soda on the table, extra ice, condensation running slowly down the sides. He folded a napkin underneath it into a triangle before walking away. It was subtle, but Mara noticed. At the far end of the bar, a few young sailors sat straighter when she entered. They didn't speak to her, just gave the respectful nod reserved for someone whose story had traveled faster than their name. The door opened again. Brennan stepped in. Alone this time. No swagger, no posse, no noise. His boots were quiet on the floor, sweatshirt replaced with standard bass issue. One stripe missing from his sleeve. Fresh bandage still taped across his forearm. He looked around like he wasn't sure why he came. Then he saw her, still, calm, same corner booth. He didn't get close this time, just stopped about 3 feet from her table, not sitting, not looming, just there. I didn't know who you were. Mara didn't look up immediately. Took a sip first, set the glass down. You shouldn't need to. Brennan swallowed. The words weren't easy. I was out of line. Yes. A pause. He didn't argue, didn't try to explain. I'm sorry. Mara's eyes finally lifted. No heat, no cold, just the kind of clarity that makes excuses unnecessary. She nodded once. Go home. Be better next time. That was all. Brennan stood there for another second, like he thought maybe there'd be more. There wasn't. He turned and left quietly. Didn't stop at the bar, didn't order a drink, didn't look back. When the door closed behind him, a contractor sitting 2 stools down leaned toward Weller. Who's she again? Weller didn't look up from his glass. Someone you don't start a fight with. In the booth, Mara took another sip, eyes calm. Not satisfied, not victorious, just still. The bar slowly resumed its rhythm. Pool balls clicked at the far table. A chair squeaked against the uneven floor, but no one spoke Mara's name. They didn't have to. She sat exactly where she had the first night. Same posture, same half-full glass in front of her. But the room around her held itself differently now, quieter, sharper, like it had been recalibrated without needing permission. Weller emerged from the back with a clean rag, wiped down the counter that didn't need it, walked over to her booth. He didn't sit, just leaned his forearms gently on the edge of the table. Voice low, just for her. You could have broken him. Mara glanced toward the door that had closed behind Brennan. Her expression didn't change. Wasn't the point. Weller nodded slowly. Thought about that. Then what was? Mara's gaze returned to her glass. She turned it slightly, rotating the ring of condensation beneath her fingers before answering, teaching him that not every fight needs noise. The silence that followed wasn't uncomfortable. It was earned. Weller straightened, eyes flicking across the bar. You know, this place has been here through 8 COs, 2 hurricanes, and that time some boot licked the jukebox and shorted half the wall. Mara gave a faint exhale that might have been a smile. But I've never seen a room go that still. Not even the night they brought home the caskets. She didn't say anything. She didn't need to. Because Roper's Landing wasn't the kind of place that handed out respect. It waited for you to earn it, usually the hard way. And now everyone inside knew exactly how fast things could change when the quiet woman in the back corner decided she'd said enough with her silence. Mara drained the last of her soda, set the glass down on the napkin Weller had folded with care. She slid the triangle back toward the center of the table and stood. Her boots made soft thuds against the floor as she walked to the door. No one stopped her. No one said goodbye. They just watched, with something between reverence and caution. The door opened, then closed. When it did, the jukebox buzzed back to life like it had finally caught its breath. Weller looked around the room. Conversations resumed, but not quite the same. Because now every chair, every booth, every drink poured in Roper's Landing lived in the shadow of the night the quiet woman stood up and reminded everyone what real control looked like. Would you have stepped in that bar, or waited like she did until it actually mattered? And when someone stays silent through the disrespect, do you see weakness or discipline? Drop your answers in the comments. I read every single one. And if you haven't already, hit that like button, subscribe, and tap the bell icon so you never miss a mission. Share this video with someone who still thinks calm means soft. And since our next operation's already on your screen, go watch it now. I'll see you tomorrow. Same time, same place.